My sister thought she could break me over a $700 loan. She and her husband laughed about it into a microphone at a charity gala, painting me as petty while their rich friends chuckled. But while they were busy performing, I was quiet. I was checking dates. I was looking at signatures. By the time they realized I was not just embarrassed, I had already turned their lies into $1,250,000 of freedom. The dinner at my sister's house always felt like a performance, and I was never quite sure if I was in the audience or part of the stage crew. Marissa and her husband, Kyle, lived in a sprawling, open-concept colonial in the nicer part of Ashford Harbor, the kind of house where the kitchen island was the size of a small car and the lighting was always perfectly dim to make everyone look successful. It was a Tuesday in early November. Outside, the Massachusetts wind was stripping the last of the red maple leaves from the trees, but inside, the thermostat was set to a tropical 72 degrees. Kyle was pouring a second glass of Cabernet for our father, who was sitting at the head of the table looking pleased with the way his youngest daughter had turned out. I sat near the end of the table, nursing my water. I was 33 years old, a compliance analyst for a regional logistics firm, and by all accounts, the boring sister. I paid my mortgage early. I kept my car clean. I did not host dinner parties on Tuesdays because I had to be up at 6 in the morning to review supply chain audits. Marissa leaned across the table, her bracelets jingling. She had that glow she always had, a mix of expensive skincare and the frantic energy of someone who was constantly keeping 20 plates spinning in the air. "Lillian, you are being so quiet," she said, smiling. "You have hardly touched your risotto." "I am fine," I said. "It is delicious. Just tired. It is the end of the quarter." Kyle laughed from the other end of the table. He was a handsome man, in a soft, politician sort of way. He worked in commercial real estate, though I was never entirely sure what his actual day-to-day looked like. He spent a lot of time at lunches and on golf courses, shaking hands and talking about community synergy. "You need to loosen up." "Lil," Kyle said, "you act like the world is going to end if a spreadsheet cell is the wrong color." Everyone chuckled. My father, my aunt, even Marissa. I forced a smile. It was the designated role I played in the family dynamic. I was the ground. They were the sky. I was the anchor. They were the sails. It was not until the coffee was served and our father had moved to the living room to watch the highlights of the game that Marissa cornered me in the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher, or rather, she was rearranging the dirty plates I had already loaded. "Hey," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "I hate to even ask this, but Kyle and I are in a weird spot with a vendor for the charity gala next month." I stiffened slightly. "Money. What kind of weird spot?" I asked. "It is stupid," she said, waving a soapy hand. "We are waiting on a refund from the caterer we canceled on. But we need to put the deposit down for the lighting guy by tomorrow morning, or we lose the booking. It is just a timing issue. The refund clears on Monday, but the deposit is due at 9 in the morning." I looked at her. Marissa was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost $300. Their refrigerator was filled with organic produce. They drove leased luxury SUVs. "How much?" I asked. $700, she said quickly. "Just until the refund hits. Tuesday at the latest. I would ask Dad. But you know how he gets about cash flow, and I do not want him worrying over nothing." I hesitated. $700 was not a life-changing amount of money, but it was not nothing. Since our mother died 2 years ago, I had become fiercely protective of my finances. I had seen how quickly stability could vanish. Mom had been the organized one, and when she was gone, the silence she left behind was filled with paperwork and unexpected costs. I had managed the estate, settling the debts, selling the house, dividing the small inheritance. I knew the value of $1 because I had counted every single one of them. "Marissa," I said, "I have bills coming out this week too." "Please, Lil," she said, turning those wide, pleading eyes on me. "It is literally for 4 days. Do not make me beg. It is for the foundation. You know how important this event is to Kyle's image." I sighed. It was easier to say yes than to be the villain. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Fine, I said, but I need it back by next Friday. Seriously. Marissa, I have my property tax payment scheduled. You are a lifesaver, she said, beaming. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, smelling of expensive vanilla perfume. Seriously, you are the best. I typed in the amount. $700. In the memo line, I typed 5 words. Repay by next Friday. I wanted a record. It was the compliance analyst in me. I hit send. The money left my account instantly. I watched the balance drop, feeling a small, cold knot in my stomach. It was just a loan. It was family. It would be fine. 3 weeks passed. The Friday deadline came and went. I sent a polite text on Saturday morning. Hey, just a reminder about that transfer. Let me know when you send it so I can look out for it. Marissa replied 4 hours later. Oh my gosh. Yes, totally forgot. Monday for sure. Sorry. Monday came. No money. Tuesday passed. Wednesday. I sat at my desk at work, staring at my computer screen, but my mind was on my bank account. It was not that I could not survive without the $700. It was the disrespect. It was the way my kindness had been tossed into a drawer and forgotten. I waited until the next family gathering was being planned in the group chat before I brought it up again. My aunt was asking about potluck dishes for Thanksgiving. Marissa was suggesting a caterer. I typed, Marissa, before we book anything, can you settle that $700 from last month? I really need to balance my books. I stared at the phone, waiting. The 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. A notification popped up. Marissa had sent an image. I opened it. It was a screenshot of the transfer memo I had written. Repay by next Friday. Below the image, she had added a caption. Imagine being this pressed over $700. My face went hot. It was instantaneous. A flush of heat rising from my collarbone to my hairline. She had sent it to the group chat. To our father. To our aunt. To Kyle. Kyle replied a second later with a laughing emoji. Dad texted, Girls, please, sort this out privately. I sat there, my thumb hovering over the keypad. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type out a paragraph detailing exactly why $700 mattered. About respect, about how I had managed Mom's estate while they went on vacation to Cabo. But I did not. I put the phone down. I took a deep breath. I refused to be the crazy one. I refused to give them the reaction they were baiting. I did not text back. 2 days later, I drove to the Bay Ridge Community Foundation fundraiser. I debated not going. The invitation had been on my fridge for a month. A heavy cardstock square with gold foil lettering. Tickets were $150 a plate, which I had paid for myself because I wanted to support the cause. Or at least, the cause Marissa and Kyle claimed to care about. They were on the organizing committee. The event was held at the Yacht Club, a sprawling white building overlooking the harbor. The parking lot was full of Mercedes and BMWs. I parked my 4-year-old sedan in the back row and walked toward the entrance, the gravel crunching under my heels. The ballroom was loud. A jazz band was playing on a raised stage, and the air smelled of perfume and roasted lamb. I navigated the crowd, nodding to people I recognized from town. Ashford Harbor was small enough that everyone knew your face, but big enough that they did not necessarily know your story. I found my assigned table near the back. Sophie Lang was there. Sophie lived in my apartment building, a freelance graphic designer with sharp eyes and a cynical sense of humor. We were friendly in the way neighbors are. Packages, spare keys, occasional glasses of wine on the balcony. Lillian, Sophie said, her eyes widening. You came. I put my purse down. Why wouldn't I? Sophie looked at me, a strange expression on her face. It was pity. I realized, pure, unfiltered pity. No reason, she said quickly. You look great. That blue is a good color on you. I sat down, smoothing my dress. The lights dimmed. Kyle was walking up to the microphone on stage, a spotlight following him. He looked radiant in a tuxedo, his smile bright enough to be seen from space. Marissa was standing just off to the side, clapping, looking adoringly at him. Thank you all for coming, Kyle boomed. his voice echoing through the speakers. The Bay Ridge Community Foundation is about one thing: family. It is about taking care of our own. Applause rippled through the room. We live in a world where everyone is looking out for number one, Kyle continued, pacing the stage. But here in Ashford Harbor, we look out for each other. We help our neighbors. We support our local businesses. He paused for effect, leaning into the mic. And we know that true generosity is not about keeping score. It is not about counting pennies. A few people chuckled. I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. I was talking to a friend the other day, Kyle said, his tone shifting to that conspiratorial, joking register, and we were talking about how money changes people. You know the type, the kind of people who nickel and dime their own family? He laughed. A short, sharp sound. I mean, imagine loaning your sister a few bucks and then acting like a debt collector over it. The room erupted in laughter. It was a wave of sound, crashing over me. My heart stopped. I sat frozen in my chair. He did not say my name. He did not have to. I saw heads turn. People at the tables nearby were glancing at me, not staring, just sliding their eyes in my direction and then looking away, smirking. They knew. Somehow, they knew. Kyle was still talking, pivoting back to the charity, but I could not hear him anymore. The heat was back, burning in my throat, tight and suffocating. My hands were trembling in my lap. They were laughing at me. My own sister and her husband were using me as a punchline to warm up a crowd of donors. I looked at Marissa. She was scanning the room, and for a split second, her eyes locked with mine. She did not look away. She smiled. It was a small, triumphant smile. See? She seemed to be saying, "You are small. We are big." I wanted to run. I wanted to stand up and flip the table and scream that they were liars, that they owed me money, that I was the responsible one, but I sat still. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. My hand shook, the ice cubes clinking against the glass. But I drank. I forced the water down my constricted throat. I sat through the rest of the speech. I sat through the applause. I sat through the first course of dinner. When the salads were cleared, I stood up. "I am going to the ladies' room," I whispered to Sophie. I walked out of the ballroom, keeping my head high, my pace steady. I did not run. I walked until I was in the lobby, and then I kept walking, out the double doors and into the cool night air. I stood by the railing, looking out at the dark water of the harbor. My chest was heaving. I felt sick. It was not just the embarrassment. It was the calculated cruelty of it. They had planned that. They had discussed it. They had decided that my dignity was a fair price to pay for a cheap laugh. The door behind me opened. I stiffened, expecting Marissa to come out and offer a fake apology, to tell me I was being too sensitive. It was Sophie. She came and stood beside me, lighting a cigarette. That was brutal. She said quietly. I did not look at her. It was a joke. He was just joking. Sophie exhaled a plume of smoke. No, Lil, it was not a joke, and it is not the first time. I turned to look at her. What do you mean? Sophie hesitated. She looked at her cigarette, then flicked the ash over the railing. Marissa has been talking, she said, at the gym, at the coffee shop. She tells people you are struggling, financially. I stared at her. Struggling? I have a savings account. I have a 401k. She says you are barely holding it together. Sophie continued, her voice gentle. She says you are bitter because you cannot handle adulthood, that you are constantly asking them for help. And when they try to set boundaries, you get petty. My mouth fell open slightly. Asking them for help? That is the narrative. Sophie said, poor Lillian, can't keep a job, can't keep a man, can't manage her checkbook. So when Kyle makes a crack about nickel and diming, everyone thinks he is talking about dealing with a moocher. They think he's the saint for putting up with you. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. It was not just an insult. It was a campaign. They were rewriting reality. They were taking my stability, my responsibility, and inverting it until I looked like a disaster. Why? I whispered. Why would they do that? Sophie shrugged. Maybe it makes them feel better about themselves. Maybe they need a villain to make their success look shinier. I don't know. Lil, but you need to know what is being said. I looked back at the brightly lit windows of the yacht club. I could see the silhouettes of people moving inside, laughing, drinking. Marissa and Kyle were in there, holding court, building their kingdom on a foundation of lies about me. I am going home, I said. Sophie nodded. Probably a good idea. I drove home in silence. My apartment was quiet. It was a 2-bedroom on the second floor of a converted Victorian house. It was neat, organized, safe. I walked into the kitchen and threw my keys on the counter. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. Subject: Thank you for your continued support. It was from the Bay Ridge Community Foundation. I frowned. I had bought my ticket for the gala, but that was weeks ago. I clicked the email open. Dear Lillian, on behalf of the Bay Ridge Community Foundation, we want to extend our deepest gratitude for your generous donation of $250 received today. Your support helps us continue our mission of... I stopped reading. I had not donated $250. I had not donated anything today. I checked my bank app immediately. No pending transactions. No charges. I looked at the email again. It was an official receipt. It had a transaction ID. It was addressed to me. Why would they send me a receipt for money I did not give? A strange feeling settled in my gut. It was different from the shame I had felt earlier. This was colder, sharper. It was the feeling I got at work when a manifest did not match the inventory log. Something was wrong. I went to my study. It was a small room, lined with bookshelves. On the bottom shelf, I kept the records from Mom's estate. It had been 2 years, but I had never thrown them away. I kept everything. Bank statements, tax returns, the probate filings. I pulled out the heavy accordion file labeled Estate of Eleanor Adams. I sat on the floor. The box settled between my knees. I did not know what I was looking for. Exactly. I just needed to ground myself in facts. Marissa and Kyle were spinning stories, but papers did not lie. I opened the folder. The smell of old paper and dust rose up. I flipped through the sections. Medical bills, funeral costs, the deed to the house we had sold. My hand stopped on a document near the back. It was a photocopy of a signature page. It was attached to a transfer of assets form, dated 3 months before Mom died. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Eleanor Adams. It looked like her handwriting. The loops on the L's were tall. The A was sharp, but there was something off about the slant. Mom had been left-handed. Her writing always leaned slightly to the left. This signature leaned to the right. I squinted at it. I pulled another document from earlier in the file, one I knew she had signed in front of me at the hospital. I held them side by side. The difference was subtle, but it was there. The pressure was different. The flow was different. And then I saw the date on the suspicious document, August 14th. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. August 14th, 2 years ago. Mom had been in the ICU that week. She had been sedated. She could barely lift a spoon, let alone sign a complex asset transfer. I looked at the document again. It was a transfer of interest for a small commercial holding I did not recognize. Seaward Row Properties, LLC. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Marissa had handled the paperwork that week. I had been working double shifts to cover the medical bills, and Marissa had said she would handle the filing. She had been so helpful that week, so eager to take the burden off me. I looked at the email on my phone. The receipt from the charity. I looked at the forged signature on the document. I thought about the $700. Why did they need $700 so badly? If they were rich enough to donate $250 in my name, why did they need to borrow money for a lighting deposit? And why shame me? Why go out of their way to paint me as financially unstable? Sophie's words echoed in my head. They need a villain. If I was the crazy, broke sister, no one would believe me if I started asking questions about money. If I was the one who nickel and dimed family, any accusation I made would look like jealousy. They were not just being mean. They were discrediting me, preemptively. I sat on the floor of my study. The papers spread out around me like a fan. The tears I had been holding back since the fundraiser evaporated. The shame in my throat cooled and hardened into something else. I was a compliance analyst. My job was to find patterns. My job was to look at lines of data and find the one that did not belong. I picked up a pen. I pulled a fresh legal pad from my desk. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Then I wrote, Item 1, the loan. Then, Item 2, the fundraiser. Then, Item 3, the receipt. Then, Item 4, the signature. I did not call Marissa. I did not text Kyle to scream at him. I did not post a defense on social media. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, and I started to build a file. They wanted to treat me like a joke? Fine, I would treat them like an audit. I picked up my phone and opened my calendar. Scrolling back 2 years, I needed to verify exactly where everyone was on August 14th. The night was just beginning, and for the first time in weeks, I did not feel small. I felt focused. I turned the page of the legal pad and began to write. The morning sun was hitting my kitchen table, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but I was not looking at the light. I was looking at my laptop screen, specifically at the annual credit report I had just downloaded. In my line of work, we are trained to look for anomalies. We look for the data point that sits just outside the standard deviation, a vendor address that matches an employee's home address, a series of invoices that are all just under the approval threshold. My personal finances were boring. That was how I liked them. I had one credit card I paid off every month. I had my mortgage. I had my car loan. But there, on page 3 of the report, was an inquiry I did not recognize. Brightline Credit Union. Hard inquiry. November 3rd. I stared at the date. November 3rd. That was the Tuesday Marissa had asked me for the $700. I sat back in my chair, the ceramic mug of coffee warming my hands. November 3rd. Why would a credit union I had never banked with be running a hard check on my credit score on the exact day my sister was begging for a bridge loan? I knew how hard inquiries worked. You had to authorize them. You had to sign a paper, or click a box, or give verbal consent recorded on a line. I had done none of those things. I picked up my phone. I needed to know what this was before I let my imagination run wild. I dialed the number for Brightline Credit Union. It was a local institution, smaller than the national banks, the kind of place that advertised on minor league baseball fences. The automated system took me through 3 menus before I finally got a human being. Brightline Credit Union. This is Sarah. How can I help you? Hi? Sarah, I said, keeping my voice level. My name is Lillian Adams. I'm looking at my credit report and I see an inquiry from your bank dated November 3rd. I do not have an account with you, and I did not apply for any loans. I was hoping you could tell me what this is regarding. There was the sound of typing on the other end. One moment, Ms. Adams. Let me pull that up. Can I have your social security number for verification? I gave it to her. I waited. The silence stretched out. Usually, this was the part where the rep would say, "Oh, looks like a mistake," or "We have a credit card application here." But Sarah did not say that. The typing stopped. Then there was a pause. "Ms. Adams," she said, and her voice had changed. It was tighter, more formal. "I see there is an existing file here connected to your profile." "An existing file?" I asked. "What kind of file?" "I am not authorized to give details over the phone without further verification," she said. My heart started to thud a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Verification?" I repeated. "You just asked for my social. I can answer security questions. I understand that, ma'am. But this file has a specific flag on it. I would need you to come into a branch with 2 forms of identification to discuss the activity on the account." "Activity?" I asked. "You said it was an inquiry. Is there an active account?" "I really cannot say more. Ms. Adams, I am sorry." She sounded nervous, not rude, just scared, like she was looking at something on her screen that she knew she was not supposed to talk about. "Can you at least tell me who opened it?" I asked. "Was it online or in person?" "I cannot give out that information. Please visit the branch on Main Street. Have a good day. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. A flag. An existing file. I looked at the date again. November 3rd. Marissa had called me that morning, frantic about the vendor deposit. She had said it was a timing issue. She had been so specific about the amount, $700, but if someone had opened an account in my name at Brightline that same week, $700 was nothing. You do not open a line of credit for $700. You open it for thousands. I felt a wave of nausea. Identity theft was a nightmare I dealt with theoretically in compliance training. It was paperwork. It was affidavits. But this felt personal. The timing was too precise. I needed advice, not from family, and not from the police. Not yet. I needed someone who understood how to navigate the gray areas where money and law intersected. I texted Nia Carver. Coffee? I have a hypothetical situation I need to run by you. It is sensitive. Nia replied in 30 seconds. Meet me at the Roost in 20 minutes. I have a gap between depositions. Nia had been my friend since college. She was a civil attorney who specialized in contract disputes and, occasionally, high-conflict divorces. She was the smartest person I knew, and the most cynical. She did not believe in coincidences. The Roost was crowded, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and damp coats. We found a small table in the back corner. Nia was wearing a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that accentuated her cheekbones. She listened while I talked. I told her about the $700. I told her about the humiliation at the gala. I told her about the fake donation receipt and the forged signature on Mom's estate paper. And finally, I told her about the phone call with Brightline. I did not cry. I laid it out like a timeline. Item A led to item B. When I finished, Nia stared at her black coffee for a long moment. You are sure about the signature? She asked. I am 90% sure. I said, it looks like Mom's, but the slant is wrong, and the date puts her in the ICU. Nia nodded slowly. Okay, here is the thing. Lil, you are standing at a crossroads. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Path 1 is the emotional path. You storm over to Marissa's house. You scream. You demand to see her records. You threaten to call the police. And? I asked. And if they are actually running a fraud, especially one that involves a community foundation and real estate, they will panic. They will shred documents. They will wipe hard drives. They will gaslight you until you think you are crazy. And because they have already started painting you as unstable to the community, everyone will believe them. They will say you are having a breakdown over grief and money. I felt the cold truth of that settle in my stomach. That was why they did it. The jokes at the gala, the whispers to Sophie. It was a preemptive strike. So what is Path 2? I asked. Path 2 is the silent path. Nia said, You do not sue. Not yet. You investigate. We treat this like a hostile discovery process, but we do it before we file a single motion. How do I get records without them knowing? I asked. The bank would not talk to me. We file a formal request under the Fair Credit Reporting Act for the bank file. Nia said, We do it in writing. We force them to produce the application documents. If they refuse, we have grounds for a subpoena later. But for the estate stuff? For the charity? She paused, looking at me with dark, intense eyes. You have to get close to them. Lil, you have to let them think they have won. If they think you are beaten down, if they think you accepted the humiliation and you are trying to earn your way back into their good graces, they will get sloppy. People who commit fraud always get arrogant eventually. They stop hiding the ledger because they think no one is watching. I have to pretend I'm okay with what they did? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Nia reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Her grip was firm. No, you have to pretend you are too weak to fight back. There is a difference. I looked at my friend. I thought about Kyle laughing into the microphone. I thought about Marissa's smirk. I can do that. I said, Good, Nia said. Because if they used your identity to secure credit, and if they messed with your mother's estate, we are not talking about a family squabble. We are talking about felonies. And when we drop the hammer, I want to make sure they are standing directly under it. 2 days later, I volunteered for the Bay Ridge Community Foundation's quarterly planning mixer. It was held in the private room of a bistro downtown. I wore a soft beige sweater and minimal makeup. I practiced my expression in the rearview mirror before I went in. Not angry, not eager, just there. Quiet, apologetic. When I walked in, the conversation lulled for a fraction of a second. I saw Marissa's eyes dart to Kyle. They were expecting a scene. They were expecting me to demand an apology for the gala. Instead, I walked over to the volunteer coordinator, a woman named Janice who always wore too many scarves. "Hi, Janice," I said softly. "I know I'm late signing up, but I have some free time this month. I was hoping I could help with the check-in desk or organization. I just want to be useful." Janice looked relieved. "Oh, Lillian, that would be wonderful. We are swamped." Marissa drifted over, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand. She looked wary. "Hey," she said, "I did not think you would come. After, I looked down at my shoes, then back up at her. I forced a small, sad smile. "I know," I said. "I was upset, obviously. But I thought about it, and, look, I know I have been tight with money lately. I do not want things to be weird between us. Family is family, right?" I watched the tension drain out of her shoulders. It was almost insulting how quickly she bought it. She wanted to believe I was the doormat. It fit her worldview. "Right," she said, beaming. "Exactly. I told Kyle you just needed a minute to cool off. He was just joking. He loves you." "I know." I lied. Kyle came over a moment later, slapping me on the back a little too hard. "Good to see you. Lil?" "No hard feelings?" "No hard feelings," I said. For the next 2 hours, I was the perfect volunteer. I hung coats, I arranged name tags, I fetched drinks, I made myself invisible, and I watched. I watched how Kyle moved through the room. He was charming, magnetic, always touching people on the arm, always laughing. But I noticed something else. There was a tablet on the main table, used for processing donations and tracking pledges. Usually at these events, the volunteers handled the tech, but every time Janice or another volunteer went near the tablet, Kyle intercepted them. I got it. He would say, "The system is a little glitchy tonight. I do not want to lose any data. Let me handle the inputs." He was guarding it. I waited until he was distracted by a wealthy donor, a man who owned a chain of car dealerships. Kyle was deep in conversation, laughing at a joke that was not funny. I picked up a tray of empty glasses and walked past the main table. I paused, pretending to adjust a stack of napkins. The tablet was open. It was not on a standard donation app. It was a spreadsheet interface. I glanced at the screen. I had 3 seconds before anyone would notice me staring. I saw a column of names, donors. Next to the names were amounts: $5,000, $2,500, $10,000. But next to the amounts, there was a column labeled routing. Most of the entries said BCF Main, but every third or fourth entry said routing HS77. HS. I moved away just as Kyle turned his head. I went to the kitchen to drop off the glasses. My mind was racing. HS. What was HS? I stayed until the end of the cleanup. Most of the guests had left. Marissa and Kyle were in the corner, arguing in hushed tones. They looked tired. The shiny veneer was slipping. I was wiping down a table near the back when I saw it. A stack of papers had been left on a chair, weighed down by a half-empty water bottle. It looked like a printout someone had been reviewing and forgot to pack away. I looked around. Janice was in the hallway. The Holts were still arguing. I walked over and lifted the water bottle. It was a ledger printout. The header read, "Bay Ridge Vendor Reimbursements. Harborstone Events. Harborstone. HS." I scanned the list. It was a list of payments made from the foundation to this vendor. November warrant. Event consulting. $4,500. November 5. Lighting deposit. $2,200. November 10. Catering supplement. $300. I froze. The numbers. They were all round. Perfectly round. In the real world, Vendors did not charge round numbers. Tax made things messy. Service fees made things messy. A catering supplement should be $3,342.16. It should not be $3,300 exactly. Repeated round numbers were a hallmark of lazy fabrication. It was the first thing they taught us in fraud detection. I pulled out my phone. I blocked the view with my body and snapped 2 quick photos of the page. I put the paper back under the water bottle. I walked out of the room, my pulse hammering in my throat. Harborstone events. That was where the money was going. Kyle was redirecting donations into a side channel disguised as vendor payments. But I needed to know who Harborstone Events was. I walked out to the parking lot. The night air was freezing. I saw Marissa and Kyle walking to their car. "Marissa!" I called out, jogging a few steps toward them. She turned, looking annoyed. "What?" "We are really tired. Lil, I just wanted to say goodnight," I said. "And I heard you guys talking earlier about some investment group. I have been trying to learn more about, managing my future better, since apparently I'm not doing a great job." I added a self-deprecating laugh. Marissa softened. She loved giving advice. It made her feel superior. "Oh, yeah," she said. "It is a private thing. Kyle got us into it. Very exclusive. But honestly, Lil, the buy-in is pretty high. I do not think it is really your speed right now." I nodded humbly. "Right, of course. What is it called? Just so I can look it up and learn." "It is called Seaward Row," Kyle said, cutting in. He was unlocking the car, his back to me. "But don't bother looking it up. It is an LLC. They do not have a website. It is strictly word of mouth. Seaward Row." The name hit me like a physical blow. I kept my face blank. "Oh, sounds fancy. Well, drive safe." I watched them drive away. The taillights of their SUV disappeared around the corner. Seaward Row Properties, LLC. That was the name on the document in my mother's file. The one with the forged signature. I did not go straight home. I drove to the 24-hour diner near the highway. The one with the neon sign that buzzed incessantly. I needed Wi-Fi, and I needed coffee, and I needed to not be alone in my apartment. I opened my laptop. I logged into the state's Secretary of the Commonwealth database. It was public record. If you knew where to look. I searched for Seaward Row Properties, LLC. The filing came up. Entity type, Limited Liability Company. Manager, Kyle Holt. Registered agent, Kyle Holt. I scrolled down to the history. The company had been formed 4 years ago. The original filing listed 2 members, Kyle Holt and Eleanor Adams. My mother. I stared at the screen. My mother had been a partner, a silent partner. Probably. She had never mentioned it to me, but Mom had a small inheritance from her own parents. Money she kept separate from Dad's pension. She must have invested it with Kyle. She trusted him. Everyone trusted him. I clicked on the amendment history. Amendment filed. August 16th, 2 years ago. Description. Withdrawal of member Eleanor Adams. Transfer of interest to managing member. August 16th. 2 days after the date on the forged signature page I had found. 2 days after Mom went into the coma she never woke up from. They had stolen her share. They waited until she was incapacitated, forged her signature assigning her interest to Kyle, and then filed it with the state. I did the math in my head. If Mom had invested, say $50,000, in a commercial real estate market like Ashford Harbor, over 4 years, that share could be worth double that now, maybe more. And it should have been part of the estate. It should have been divided between Marissa and me. Instead, Kyle had absorbed it. I sat back in the booth, the vinyl squeaking. The waitress came by and refilled my coffee, but I did not look up. Everything clicked into place. The cruelty, the shaming. They had stolen a significant asset from me. They knew that if I ever found out, if I ever audited the estate properly, I would see the hole where that money should be. So they needed to discredit me. They needed to establish a narrative that I was incompetent, that I was desperate for money, that I was the kind of person who would make up wild accusations to get cash from my successful sister, the $700 loan. It wasn't because they were broke. It was a test. They wanted to see if I would roll over. They wanted to create a public conflict over a small amount of money, so that if I ever came after them for the big money, the Seaward Row money, they could point to the $700 incident and say, "Look, she has been obsessed with our money for months. She went crazy over $700. Of course she is making up this investment story. It was a setup, a long-con setup to insulate themselves from the theft of my inheritance." I looked at the screen again, but they had made a mistake. They had gotten greedy. They weren't just sitting on the stolen asset, they were using it. Seaward Row was connected to the Harborstone events kickbacks. I was sure of it. They were using the shell company to launder money from the charity, and they had opened a credit line in my name. Why? Probably to leverage more capital, if they were overextended, if they were buying properties or moving cash to cover the fraud. They needed clean names to open accounts. My name was clean, and since they had already successfully forged my mother's signature, why not mine? I closed my laptop. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage. They thought they were playing chess. They thought I was a pawn, but I was not a pawn. I was the person who read the footnotes. I was the person who checked the timestamps. I picked up my phone and took a picture of the screen, the Secretary of State filing showing Kyle as the manager of Seaward Row. I sent it to Nia. Then I typed a message. I know how they are doing it, and I know what they took. It is not just the credit line. They stole my inheritance. I paid for my coffee. I left a $5 tip on a $3 bill. I walked out to my car. Ideally, this was the part of the story where I would drive to their house and confront them, where I would throw the papers in their faces and demand justice. But I remembered Nia's advice, path 2, the silent path. I needed more than a screenshot. I needed the bank records. I needed the original signature card. I needed to prove the money flow from the charity to the shell company. I needed to help them hang themselves. I got into my car and started the engine. I checked my mirror. My eyes looked different. They were harder. Marissa wanted me to be the poor, struggling sister. Fine. I would be the poor, struggling sister. I would be so pathetic, so beaten down, that they would never suspect I was sharpening the knife. I drove home, the city lights blurring past me. I was not Lillian the victim anymore. I was Lillian the auditor. And I was about to conduct the most thorough review of their lives they could ever imagine. The subject line was innocuous. Tax documents request. I typed it out on my laptop at 6 a.m, sitting at my kitchen island with a mug of black coffee. The apartment was silent, the kind of heavy, insulated silence that usually comforted me but lately felt like a waiting room. I addressed the email to the general inquiry inbox for the Bay Ridge Community Foundation. "Good morning," I wrote. "I'm preparing my files for the upcoming tax season and realized I do not have a consolidated statement of my charitable contributions for the year. Could you please forward my donor statement at your earliest convenience? Thank you. Lillian Adams." I hit send. It was a baiting move. In the world of compliance, you never ask the question you really want the answer to. You ask a boring question that forces the other person to hand over the data containing the answer. If I had asked, "Why did you send me a thank you note for money I did not give?" they would have panicked. They would have claimed a clerical error. They would have scrubbed the record. But asking for a tax statement? That was routine. That was administrative. It triggered an automatic response from the bookkeeping software, not a strategic decision from Kyle or Marissa. The reply came 3 hours later, while I was reviewing a shipping manifest at work. Attached. L. Adams, donor, statement, FY24. PDF. My hand hovered over the mouse. I took a breath, steeling myself, and double-clicked the file. The document opened. It was formatted on official Bay Ridge letterhead, clean and professional. I scanned the list of entries. January 15th, $50. Annual appeal. March 3rd, $100. Spring Drive. Those were real. I had made those donations. I scrolled down. August 12th, $500. Summer Gala sponsor. September 1st, $1,000. Community Outreach Fund. October 15th, $2,000. General Operating Support. November 3rd, $250. Late autumn fundraiser. I stared at the screen. The total at the bottom was $3,900. I had donated $150 this year. They were washing money through my name. It was classic placement. They took cash. Maybe from ticket sales. Maybe from unrecorded donations. Maybe from somewhere else. And they attributed it to a safe, boring donor who was unlikely to check her statement. Me. By recording it as a donation from me, they legitimized the cash entering the foundation's accounts. Then, they could pay it out to their vendors, to Harborstone Events, to themselves. I printed the document. I did not save it to my work drive. I printed 2 copies, put them in a manila envelope, and slid it into my bag. That afternoon, I took a half day. I told my boss I had a dental appointment. I drove to the next town over, to a brick office park that looked like it hadn't been renovated since 1990. The sign on the door said, Holloway Pierce, Certified Public Accountants. I had found them online. I wanted someone unconnected to Ashford Harbor, someone who did not know Kyle Holt's winning smile or Marissa's social standing. Mr. Holloway was a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that smelled of pipe tobacco. He sat behind a desk piled high with files. Looking at the spreadsheet I had prepared, I had redacted the names, labeling them simply Foundation and Vendor and Individual A. So, let me get this straight. Mr. Holloway said, tapping a pencil against his chin, you are saying Individual A, that is you, is showing donations on the books that Individual A never made? Correct, I said, and the foundation is paying out round number sums to a vendor that seems to have a personal connection to the foundation's managers. Mr. Holloway sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. It is the oldest game in town, Miss Adams. It is called ghost pledging. Ghost pledging? I asked. Usually. You see it the other way around, he said. A nonprofit invents a donor to explain why they have extra cash on hand. Maybe they are skimming off the top of a grant, or they are hiding income from an unrelated business. They need a source, so they pick a name from their database, usually someone reliable, someone who gives small amounts regularly, and they pad the numbers. He pointed to the vendor column on my spreadsheet. And this? This is the exit door. The money comes in through the ghost donor, and it goes out to the shell vendor. It looks clean on both sides. The IRS sees a donation. The IRS sees a business expense. Unless someone audits the specific bank transfers, it is invisible. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Is it common? Mr. Holloway put his glasses back on. Fraud is always common, he said. But the smart ones? They do not start with millions. They start with hundreds. He looked at me, his eyes sharp and intelligent. Fraud often starts small to test who notices, he said. They dip a toe in. They forge a signature on a check for $50. They fake a donation for $200. If the victim stays quiet, if the system does not blink, they assume the door is unlocked. Then they walk right in and take the furniture. I nodded slowly. The $700 loan, the $250 receipt. They were testing the door handles, and because I had been polite, because I had loaned the money and not made a scene at the gala, they thought the house was empty. Thank you. Mr. Holloway, I said. I paid him in cash. I did not want a credit card trail leading back to an accountant. I spent the next 2 nights digging. I had the name Seaward Row Properties, LLC from the Secretary of State filing I had found earlier. I knew Kyle was the manager. I knew my mother had been removed as a member 2 days after she went into a coma, but I needed to know what Seaward Row actually did. I went to the County Registry of Deeds website. It was a clunky, outdated portal that required patience and exact spelling. I searched grantee, Seaward Row Properties, LLC. The list populated. They owned 3 units. 2 were small residential condos on the edge of town, likely rentals, but the third was significant. Unit 4B, the Cannery Wharf, 12 Water Street. I knew that building. It was a renovated factory right on the harbor. Prime commercial real estate. The ground floor was retail. The upper floors were offices and luxury lofts. I clicked on the deed. Seaward Row had purchased it 5 years ago. Then I searched grantor. Seaward Row Properties LLC. There was a pending entry, a notice of sale agreement filed just last week. They were selling Unit 4B. I checked the listing price on a commercial real estate site. $1.2 million. My heart hammered against my ribs. If my mother had a 20% stake, or even 10%, that was over $100,000, maybe more. And they were cashing out. That was why they needed the credit line. That was why they were moving money around. They were polishing the asset for sale, clearing up liens, getting ready to take $1 million payday. I was sitting on my couch, staring at the screen, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Gable, my neighbor down the hall. "Hi, Lillian. Sorry to bother you late. Do you know if your sister is okay? I saw her and Kyle outside in the parking lot just now. They were arguing with a guy in a very flashy car." I frowned. Mrs. Gable was a chronic curtain twitcher, but she was observant. "I am not sure." I typed back. "What kind of car?" "A black Maserati." Mrs. Gable replied, "You do not see many of those in our lot." The guy looked angry. He was waving a folder around. "I just wanted to make sure they were safe." A black Maserati. I remembered the conversation I had overheard at the volunteer night. Harborstone events. A nonprofit vendor did not drive a Maserati. A caterer did not drive a Maserati. Marissa and Kyle were meeting their money man in the parking lot of my apartment building? No, they wouldn't come here. Unless they were coming to see me, and he intercepted them. Or unless they were using my address for something. I went to my front door and looked out the peephole. The hallway was empty. I walked down the stairs to the lobby and peered out the glass doors. The parking lot was dark. I saw Mrs. Gable's Honda. I saw my sedan. And in the far corner, under the flickering street lamp, I saw Kyle's SUV. It was idling. I watched as a sleek black car, low, aggressive, definitely expensive, pulled out of the spot next to them and sped away. Kyle's SUV sat there for another minute. Then the lights flared, and it backed out, driving off in the opposite direction. They had been here. Why? I went back upstairs, my mind racing. Were they checking on me? Were they dropping something off? I checked my mailbox in the lobby on the way back. It was empty. But the next morning, the certified letter arrived. It came to my office, not my home. That was the first sign that this was a legal maneuver, not a family one. I signed for the green card with a shaking hand. The return address was a law firm in Boston I did not recognize. I took the envelope into the break room and closed the door. I used a letter opener to slice the top. Inside was a single stiff sheet of paper and a photocopy of a document. Dear Ms. Adams, Re. Confirmation of assignment of interest. We represent Seaward Row Properties, LLC. In preparation for the upcoming sale of the property located at 12 Water Street, we are auditing all historical member transfers to ensure clean title. Please find attached a copy of the assignment of interest executed by you on September 10th, 2 years ago, transferring your inherited interest in the subject entity to Kyle Holt for the consideration of $1 and other good and valuable consideration. No action is required on your part. This is a courtesy notification as we finalize the title insurance. I pulled out the attachment. Assignment of interest. I, Lillian Adams, heir to the estate of Eleanor Adams, hereby assign, transfer, and convey all rights, title, and interest. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was my signature, Lillian Adams. It looked exactly like my signature, the loop of the L, the sharp S at the end. It was better than the forgery of my mother's signature. This was a masterpiece, but I had not signed it. September 10th, 2 years ago. I stared at the date, and then I looked at the notary stamp next to the signature, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Notary Public, James P. Miller. Commission expires, May 2026. The stamp was blurry, but legible. I did not panic. Panic was for people who did not have a plan. I had a plan. I had a timeline. I took a picture of the document and sent it to Nia via an encrypted messaging app we had switched to. Call me. I typed. Nia called 5 minutes later. I am looking at it, she said. Her voice clipped. It is a bold move, sending it to you. They are betting you will not read it, or you will not understand what it means. They are betting you will think, "Oh, I must have signed this when Mom died and I forgot." They are trying to clear the title so they can sell the building. I said, "Exactly. They cannot get title insurance if there is a loose thread. You are the loose thread. By sending this, they create a paper trail that says they notified you. If you do not object, they can claim you acquiesced." I looked at the notary stamp again. James P. Miller, Nia. I said, "I need to know who this notary is." "I am already running him," Nia said. I can hear her typing furiously in the background. "James P. Miller. Okay, here we go." She paused. "Well, this is interesting." "What?" "James P. Miller was a notary who operated out of a shipping kiosk in Briarwood Plaza. You know the one? Next to the dry cleaner?" "Yes." I said, "That kiosk went out of business 3 years ago." Nia said, "The space is a vape shop now." I felt a surge of adrenaline. So the stamp is invalid? The commission might still be valid technically, but the location is gone. And here's the kicker. "Lil, look at the date. September 10th. I looked. Where were you on September 10th? 2 years ago?" Nia asked. I closed my eyes, accessing the mental calendar I had built. I was in Chicago. I said, "I was at the North American Logistics Conference. I was there for 4 days. I have the flight receipts. I have the hotel folio. I have a picture of me standing in front of the bean." Nia let out a low, satisfied sound. "You were in Chicago," she said, "but you supposedly appeared before a notary in a defunct kiosk in Massachusetts to sign away your inheritance for $1. It is a forgery." I said, "A provable forgery. It is a felony," Nia corrected. "And it is the lever we are going to use to pry their entire life apart. But not yet." "Not yet?" I asked. "They are selling the building. Nia, if they sell it, the money disappears. We will stop the sale," she said. "But we do it at the last possible second. We let them think they are clear. We let them spend the money in their heads. And then we file the injunction." I hung up the phone. I looked at the forged document one more time. They had stolen my name. They had stolen my mother's legacy, and they had done it for $1. The following Sunday was my father's birthday. The dinner was at a steakhouse on the waterfront. It was expensive, loud, and exactly the kind of place Kyle loved. I walked in 10 minutes late. I had spent 20 minutes in my car doing breathing exercises. When I arrived, the table was already full. Marissa was there, wearing a dress that glittered under the recessed lighting. Kyle was holding court at the head of the table, telling a story about a zoning board victory. "Lillian!" Kyle shouted, waving me over. "We were taking bets on whether you would show up." I smiled. It felt like a mask of clay drying on my face. "Happy birthday." "Dad," I said, kissing my father on the cheek. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic on the bridge." "Sit, sit," Marissa said, patting the empty chair next to her. We ordered the appetizers. I sat. The waiter poured me a glass of water. "So, Lil," Marissa said, leaning in. Her voice was loud enough to carry over the ambient noise. "Did you get that transfer?" I froze. She was bringing up the money. "Here, now. What transfer?" I asked. "The $700, she said, laughing. "God, you were so intense about it. I figured you would have been checking your account every 5 minutes. I felt the eyes of the table turn to me. My aunt was watching. My father looked uncomfortable. "I checked this morning," I said quietly. "It was not there." "Oh, Kyle must have sent it this afternoon," Marissa said, waving a hand airily. "We have been so busy with the foundation. Moving money around is such a headache. But seriously, Lil, next time you are short on cash, just ask us. You do not have to do the whole loan charade." I gripped my fork under the table until my knuckles turned white. She was flipping the script. She was making it sound like I was the one who needed the money, and the loan was just a way for me to save face. "I am not short on cash." "Marissa," I said, keeping my voice even, "you asked me for the money, remember?" For the lighting deposit? Kyle laughed from the end of the table. Classic Lil, he said, always keeping the receipts. You should be a debt collector. Lillian, you have the personality for it. Debt collector. Lil, Marissa chimed in. That is catchy. The table laughed. Even my father chuckled a little, though he looked at me with apologetic eyes. Come on, Lillian, he said gently. It is a joke. Smile. I looked at them. I looked at their shining faces, their expensive clothes, their utter confidence that I would sit there and take it. They wanted me to snap. They wanted me to throw my water in Kyle's face. They wanted me to scream that they were liars and thieves, because if I screamed, I was the unstable one. If I screamed, I was the bitter spinster sister who was jealous of their success. I took a sip of water. I swallowed the rage. It tasted like metal. I guess I'm just detailed-oriented. I said softly, It comes with the job. I picked up my menu. I saw the disappointment flicker in Marissa's eyes. She wanted a fight. I gave her nothing. I sat through the dinner. I ate my steak. I listened to Kyle brag about the big things coming down the pipeline for Seaward Row. We are looking at a major liquidity event, he said, winking at my father. Really going to take the family to the next level. I chewed slowly. Liquidity event. He meant selling the building he stole from me. When I got home that night, I checked my bank account. The deposit was there. $700. But it was not from Marissa Holt, and it was not from Kyle Holt. The sender name on the transfer was truncated, but legible. BCF, Petty Cash Ops, Bay Ridge Community Foundation. They had paid me back using charity funds. They were so comfortable using the nonprofit as their personal piggy bank that they did not even bother to hide it. They used donor money, money meant for scholarships, for food pantries, to pay off a personal debt to their sister-in-law. I took a screenshot, evidence, but the real blow came the next morning. I was at my desk when Nia called. She did not say hello. Are you sitting down? She asked. Yes, I said. What is it? We got the full file from Brightline Credit Union, she said. They caved after I sent the demand letter threatening a federal complaint. And? I asked. Lillian. It is not just an inquiry. My stomach dropped. You said there was a file. There is a line of credit. Nia said. Open November 3rd. How much? I asked. $48,000, she said. The room spun. $48,000? And they have maxed it out? I whispered. Fully drawn, Nia said. But that is not the worst part. What could be worse than $48,000 of debt in my name? I am looking at the collateral agreement, Nia said. Her voice was grim. Unsecured personal loans usually cap out lower than that. To get $50,000, you need to show assets. What assets? I asked. I do not have $50,000 in equity they can access. They used an anticipated inheritance instrument, Nia said. I frowned. What does that mean? It means they submitted paperwork claiming that you are the sole beneficiary of a pending real estate liquidation. Specifically, the sale of a commercial unit owned by the estate of Eleanor Adams. I stopped breathing. They used the Seaward Row unit. I said, they played both sides. Nia said, on one hand, they forged a document saying you assigned the interest to Kyle so he can sell it. On the other hand, they forged a document saying you still own it and are borrowing against the future sale proceeds to get a loan from the credit union. They are double dipping. I said, they are triple dipping. Nia said, they stole the asset, they are selling the asset, and they borrowed money in your name against the asset they stole. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't fear. It was awe. It was the sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. They looked at me, their quiet, compliant sister, and they saw a resource. They saw a name they could sign, a credit score they could ruin, a life they could hollow out to fill their own pockets. They did not think of me as a person. They thought of me as a shell company. Is the $48,000 gone? I asked. It was transferred to an account at a different bank. Nia said, we are tracing it now, but I would bet my law license it went to Harborstone Events. I stared at the wall of my office. I looked at the calendar. How long until the sale of the building closes? I asked. 10 days, Nia said. The closing is scheduled for the 15th. 10 days. In 10 days, they would have the $1.2 million. In 10 days, they would pay off the $48,000 loan, maybe, and wash their hands of the whole thing. Or maybe they would leave me with the debt. Why would they pay it off? If they defaulted, the bank would come after me, not them. Nia, I said. Yeah? Do not file the injunction yet, Lil. That is risky. No, I said. I want them to feel safe. I want them to walk into that closing room thinking they own the world. I want them to sign the final papers. Why? Because I want to catch them when they are holding the pen. I said, I looked at the screenshot of the $700 repayment on my phone. BCF. Petty cash ops. They shamed me for needing money. They laughed at me for counting pennies. I am going to take every single penny they have. I said. I hung up the phone. I went back to work. I reviewed shipping manifests. I checked compliance codes. I was very, very good at my job. And for the next 10 days, I was going to be the best sister in the world. I would smile. I would ignore the insults. I would let them call me debt collector Lil, because the debt was coming due. And the interest rate was going to be catastrophic. The Federal Trade Commission website was designed to be calming. It used soft blues and grays, clear fonts, and simple buttons. I sat at my desk at home, the glow of the monitor the only light in the room, and clicked the button labeled Report Identity Theft. It felt anticlimactic. I was initiating a chain of events that would likely end with my sister in handcuffs, and all it required was a drop-down menu and a few typed sentences. I filled in the details of the Brightline Credit Union account. I entered the amount, $48,000. I listed the date it was opened. When the form asked, "Do you know the identity of the suspect?" I hesitated. My finger hovered over the yes button. If I clicked yes and typed in Marissa Holt and Kyle Holt, the investigation would turn criminal immediately. The police would knock on their door, but I was not ready for the knock. Not yet. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to proceed with the sale of the building. I clicked no. I filed the report as an unknown perpetrator. It established the timeline. It created a federal record that I had contested the debt. That was all I needed for now. The next morning, I met Nia at her office. It was a glass-walled space overlooking the harbor, filled with the scent of expensive paper and stress. "We are filing the preservation order today," Nia said. She slid a thick document across the mahogany desk. "It is an ex parte motion. That means we go to the judge without notifying Kyle or Marissa first. Will the judge grant it?" I asked. Nia nodded. "We are attaching the affidavit about the forged notary stamp. That is enough to show a likelihood of criminal tampering. We are asking the court to freeze all records related to Seaward Row Properties and the Bay Ridge Community Foundation. We are not asking to freeze the money yet, just the records." "Why not the money?" I asked. "Because if we freeze the accounts, they know the jig is up," Nia said. "They stop the sale. They lawyer up. They start hiding assets in crypto or offshore. We want the records preserved so that when we do hit them, nothing can be deleted. We are locking the doors to the archive room while they are still dancing in the ballroom." I signed the affidavit. My hand was steady. "Just remember," Nia said, watching me closely. "Once we file this, there is a clock ticking. The court will eventually serve them with the order. It might take a week, maybe 2. You have to keep playing the role until then." "I can do it," I said, "to trace the money." Nia brought in a specialist. Gavin Rhee was a forensic accountant who looked more like a librarian than a financial detective. He wore a tweed jacket and spoke in a hushed, reverent tone, as if numbers were religious artifacts. We met in a conference room at Nia's firm. Gavin projected a diagram onto the smartboard. It looked like a tangled web of fishing line. "Here is the flow," Gavin said, using a laser pointer. "It starts at the Bay Ridge Community Foundation. That is the green circle." He traced a line to a red square. "Money leaves the foundation labeled as vendor payments to Harborstone events," he said. "We saw that on the ledger you photographed, but here is where it gets interesting. Harborstone is not a real event company. It is a pass-through entity. It has no employees, no warehouse, no inventory. Where does the money go? I asked. Gavin clicked the remote. A new line appeared, leading to a blue triangle. Northtide Consulting. Gavin said, Harborstone pays Northtide for strategic management services. And who owns Northtide? I asked. Gavin smiled. A small, tight expression. Northtide Consulting is registered in Delaware, which usually hides ownership, but they made a mistake. They paid a local excise tax bill last year from a checking account. That account is signatory linked to Kyle Holt. I stared at the diagram. So they take donor money. I said, they pay a fake event company. The fake event company pays a fake consulting firm. And the consulting firm pays Kyle. And Marissa, Gavin added. We found transfers from Northtide to a personal account that lists Marissa Holt as the primary. They are using it to pay their mortgage, their car leases, and their credit card bills. They are living a $300,000 lifestyle on a $90,000 reported income. It was so clean, so simple. And the $48,000 from the credit line in my name? I asked. It went straight into Northtide, Gavin said. They treated it like revenue. They probably used it to cover a cash flow gap in the construction of the scheme. Ponzi schemes always need fresh cash to pay the bottom layer. Your credit line was the fresh cash. They are not just thieves, I said softly. They are laundering money. That is correct, Gavin said. And that is a federal crime with a mandatory minimum sentence. I looked at the diagram. It was a map of their destruction. Thank you. Gavin, I said. Marissa called me 2 days later. Hey, she said. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. Can you meet me for coffee? I feel like we need to clear the air. I agreed. We met at a Starbucks on the edge of town. Neutral ground. Marissa was wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf that looked like it cost more than my first car. She looked tired. Her skin was pale, and she kept checking her phone. Lillian, she started, not waiting for me to sit down. This weirdness between us has to stop. I sat down, placing my hands on the table. What weirdness? You know what I mean, she snapped. Then she lowered her voice, glancing around. The cold shoulder, the passive-aggressive comments about the loan. People are talking. People are talking? I asked. Yes. People in the circle. They sense the tension. It is making Kyle look bad. And when Kyle looks bad, the foundation looks bad. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her palm was damp. Look, I am sorry about the joke at the gala, okay? It was insensitive, but you have to let it go. You are ruining my reputation by walking around like a tragic victim. I looked at her hand on mine. I remembered her smirking at the table while the room laughed at me. I am not doing anything to your reputation. Marissa, I said calmly, she hissed. You are making people wonder if we are fighting, and that makes donors nervous. We are trying to close a major deal right now. Lil, a huge real estate deal that could set us up for life. I need you to be on board. I need you to look happy. A deal. The sale of Seaward Row. She was not worried about our relationship. She was worried that a family feud would spook the buyers or the title company. I pulled my hand away gently. I am happy. Marissa, I said, I am just busy. Work is crazy. Just drop the $700 thing, she said, her voice trembling. Please, it makes you look so petty. I looked her in the eye. It is dropped, I said. I haven't mentioned it in weeks. She searched my face, looking for the lie, but I had become very good at hiding. Okay, she said, exhaling. Okay, good. Just come to the holiday party on Saturday. Smile, be normal, for Mom's sake. The mention of our mother was a sharp, physical pain in my chest. She used Mom's name as a weapon, a shield, a bargaining chip. I will be there. I said. The holiday party was at their house. It was a catered affair. Naturally. Harborstone Events probably billed the foundation $10,000 for the finger sandwiches. I wore a red dress. I drank sparkling cider. I smiled until my jaw ached. Kyle cornered me in the hallway near the guest bathroom. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. Lil! The star of the show, he boomed. He put an arm around my shoulder, squeezing too tight. He pulled a thick white envelope from his inside jacket pocket. Here, he said, pressing it into my hand. What is this? I asked. It is $1,000, he whispered, winking. Cash, the $700 I owe you, plus $300 for being a good sport. Interest, right? Let's just laugh about this whole thing and move on. I could feel the texture of the bills through the paper. It was heavy. He wanted to buy my silence. He wanted to erase the debt with untraceable cash, probably skimmed from the foundation's latest fundraiser. If I took it, I was complicit. If I took it, the paper trail ended. I pushed the envelope back against his chest. I cannot take this. Kyle, don't be polite. Take it, he said, trying to shove it back. No, I said. My voice was low but hard. I need you to transfer it. Kyle's smile faltered. What? Why? Cash is king. Baby, I need the record. I said, for my taxes. My accountant is being really strict this year about undocumented income. If I deposit $1,000 in cash, it raises flags. Just wire it to my account. Kyle stared at me. His eyes narrowed slightly. You are serious? You want me to wire you $700 instead of taking $1,000 in cash right now? Yes, I said. Just the $700. I do not want the interest. I just want the principal back, documented. He held the envelope for a second longer, then shoved it back into his pocket. You are a piece of work. Lillian, he said, a real piece of work. Fine, I will have the bookkeeper handle it on Monday. He pushed past me, his shoulder bumping mine hard enough to bruise. He was angry. Good. Angry people made mistakes. Angry people got sloppy. He would have the bookkeeper handle it. That meant another transfer from a compromised account, another line on Gavin's spreadsheet. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I drove to the county seat, a 40-minute drive inland. I parked at the courthouse and went to the probate clerk's office. It was a basement room that smelled of old toner and mildew. I requested the file for the estate of Eleanor Adams. The clerk, a woman named Barbara who looked like she had been working there since the Reagan administration, handed me a thick folder. I took it to a viewing table. I had copies of most of this at home, but I wanted to see the official court record. I wanted to see what the judge had seen. I turned the pages: death certificate, will, inventory of assets. I stopped at the section regarding real estate. There was the house, there was the small plot of land in Maine, but there was no mention of Seaward Row Properties, LLC. I flipped back and forth. If Mom had owned an interest, it should have been listed. If she had transferred it before death, there should be a record of that transfer in the file if it happened within the look-back period. Then I saw it. Page 42. Schedule of non-probate transfers. The page was numbered 42 at the bottom. The next page was numbered 44. Page 43 was missing. I went back to the counter. Excuse me. I said, this file seems to be missing a page. Page 43. Barbara sighed and walked over. She flipped through the file. Huh, she said. That is odd. Let me check the digital scan. Sometimes papers get stuck. She went to her computer and typed in the case number. She squinted at the screen. Okay, she said. The system shows that page 43 was removed and re-indexed as a separate filing. A correction of inventory. Can I see the request for the correction? I asked. She clicked a few keys. Here it is. Filed 2 months after the initial probate opened. Request to remove erroneous asset listing. Submitted by the executor's assistant. I was the executor. I did not have an assistant. Who submitted it? I asked. Is there an email or a contact? Barbara turned the monitor so I could see. Request for correction. Submitted electronically. Contact email. rissilou@d2gmail.com. I stared at the screen. The air left my lungs. Rissy Lou. That was what our dad used to call Marissa when she was a baby. Rissy Lou. It was her old email address, the one she used in high school, the one she used for her wedding planning. Marissa had logged into the court portal. She had posed as my assistant. She had filed a request to remove the Seaward Row interest from the inventory, claiming it was an error, claiming the asset had been transferred prior to death. and she had removed the page that would have proven Mom still owned it. She did not just sign a paper. She hacked the probate process. She erased our mother's legacy from the legal record while I was busy picking out the casket. I stood there in the clerk's office, gripping the edge of the counter. For weeks, I had been fueled by anger. I had been fueled by the injustice of the money and the insults. But this was different. I remembered the weeks after Mom died. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table, drowning in paperwork, crying over funeral arrangements. I remembered Marissa coming over, bringing casseroles, hugging me, telling me I was doing such a good job. "You are so strong, Lil," she had said. "I do not know how you handle all this boring paper stuff. I just cannot focus." She was focusing just fine. While I was mourning, she was stealing. While I was grieving the loss of the only person who truly understood me, Marissa was logging into a government website to delete an asset so she and Kyle could buy a boat or a new car or whatever it was they wanted. She had looked me in the eye and hugged me, while her hand was in my pocket. My vision blurred. It wasn't tears. It was clarity. The grief I had been holding back for 2 years, the grief I thought I had processed, came rushing back. But it was not soft anymore. It was hard. It was crystallized. They did not just take the money. They took the truth of my mother's life. They took her final wishes and rewrote them to service their greed. I looked at Barbara. "Can I get a certified printout of that request log?" I asked, including the IP address and the contact email. "Sure, honey," Barbara said. 50 cents a page. I paid with a crisp dollar bill. I drove straight to Nia's office from the courthouse. I did not go home. I did not change clothes. I walked into her office without knocking. "File it," I said. Nia looked up from her computer. "File what? The preservation order?" "We did that." "No," I said. "The lis pendens. The notice of pendency of action." Nia sat up straighter. "Lil, we talked about this. If we file a lis pendens against the property, it kills the sale immediately. The title company will see a cloud on the title and pull the insurance. The buyer will walk." "Good," I said. "But if we stop the sale now," Nia warned, "Kyle and Marissa will know we are coming. They will know it is you. It is a declaration of war." I slammed the certified printout from the probate court onto her desk. "They declared war 2 years ago." I said, "Look at this." Nia picked up the paper. She read the email address. She read the timestamp. "Jesus," she whispered. "Marissa did this?" "She deleted page 43, I said. She erased Mom. I sank into the chair opposite Nia. I felt heavy, anchored by a new kind of gravity. "I do not want the money from the sale." I said, "I do not want a settlement check. I want the building. I want the asset back in the estate, and I want them to lose everything they thought they were going to get." Nia looked at me. She saw the shift. She saw that I wasn't playing the compliance game anymore. I was playing for blood. "The sale is scheduled for next Tuesday," Nia said. "If we file the lis pendens tomorrow morning, it hits the registry of deeds by noon. The title searcher for the buyer does a final check 24 hours before closing. So they will find out on Monday?" I asked. "Monday morning," Nia said. "They will get a call from their closing attorney saying the deal is dead because there is a lawsuit claiming fraudulent conveyance of title. Do it," I said. Nia nodded. She opened a new file on her screen. "I need you to sign the verification," she said. "It states that you have a valid claim to the property." I picked up the pen. I remembered Kyle's face when he tried to hand me the cash. "Let's just laugh about this." I signed my name, Lillian Adams. It was the same signature they had forged, but this time, the ink was wet. This time, the hand was mine. "Cloud the title." I said, "Freeze it all." Nia hit print. The sound of the printer whirring to life was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Kyle and Marissa were probably toasting to their upcoming windfall. They were probably spending the money in their heads right now. Monday morning was going to be a very bad day for the Holt family. But for me, it was just the beginning of the audit. The fallout from the lis pendens was not an explosion, it was a suffocation. When Nia filed the document on Monday morning, the legal effect was immediate. A notice of pendency of action acts like a giant red warning flare shot into the sky over a piece of property. It tells every title insurance company, every bank, and every potential buyer that the ownership of the building is in dispute. By noon on Monday, the sale of Unit 4B at the Cannery Wharf was dead in the water. No title company would insure the transfer. The buyers, an investment group from Boston who wanted a clean deal, walked away before lunch. I did not see the moment Kyle found out. I did not see him throw his phone or punch a wall, but I felt the vibration of it. My phone started ringing at 1 in the afternoon. It was Kyle, then Marissa, then Kyle again, then the house line. I did not answer. I sat at my desk at the logistics firm, reviewing a customs declaration for a shipment of machine parts, and I let the phone vibrate against the wood of the desk. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was the sound of panic. For 3 days, the Holts tried to reach me. I maintained radio silence. I went to work. I went to the grocery store. I went home. I parked my car in the well-lit area of the lot. But on Thursday, the battlefield shifted. They realized they could not bully me over the phone, so they decided to burn the ground I stood on. I was in the break room making tea when my manager, David, asked to see me in his office. David was a good man, a soft-spoken operations director who valued punctuality and spreadsheets. He looked uncomfortable. He was shifting papers around on his desk, avoiding eye contact. "Close the door." "Lillian," he said. I sat down. My stomach tightened. In the corporate world, closed doors meant bad news. "Is everything all right?" I asked. David sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Lillian, you know we value you here. Your work is impeccable, but I had a very disturbing phone call this morning." I waited. "It was your sister, Marissa," David said. The air left the room. Marissa had called my boss. She had crossed the line between personal family drama and my livelihood. She sounded very concerned. David continued. "She told me that you have been struggling lately. Since your mother passed. She said you have been having episodes of paranoia, that you have been lashing out at family members and making up stories about money." I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap, under the desk. My fingernails were digging into my palms. "She suggested that you might be having a breakdown," David said gently. "She wanted to know if we had noticed any erratic behavior. She asked if we should perhaps put you on medical leave for your own safety." It was a masterstroke of cruelty. If I got angry, if I raised my voice and called her a liar, I would look exactly like the hysterical, unstable woman she had described. She was using my job security to gaslight me into submission. I looked at David. I saw the pity in his eyes. He believed her, or at least, he was worried enough to cover the company's liability. I took a slow, steady breath. I remembered Nia's voice, path 2, the silent path. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a folder. It contained a copy of the identity theft report I had filed with the Federal Trade Commission, and a copy of the preservation order the judge had granted regarding the forged documents. "David," I said, my voice low and steady, "I apologize that my family has dragged you into this. It is incredibly unprofessional of my sister to call you." I slid the papers across the desk. "I am not having a breakdown," I said. "I am the victim of a significant financial crime involving identity theft and forgery. The perpetrators are currently under investigation." David picked up the papers. He read the header on the court order. "Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Superior Court Department, Order for Preservation of Evidence." He looked at the fraud report. Amount, $48,000. His eyes widened. This is a legal matter," he said. "Yes," I said. "My sister and her husband are currently attempting to intimidate me into dropping a civil suit regarding the theft of estate assets. Calling my employer to damage my reputation is a tactic to force a settlement." I looked him squarely in the eye. "I am fully capable of performing my duties. David, I am handling this through the proper legal channels. I hope you can respect that this is a private matter," despite her attempt to make it public. David put the papers down. The pity in his eyes was gone, replaced by shock and a sudden, sharp respect. "I understand. Lillian," he said, "I am sorry. I had no idea. If she calls again, I said, standing up, please tell her to direct all communication to my attorney, Nia Carver. I walked out of his office. My legs were shaking, but my head was high. She had tried to get me fired. She had tried to paint me as crazy to the people who signed my paycheck. The gloves were off. That evening, I met Gavin Rhee at his office. The forensic accountant looked more tired than usual. He had piles of printouts covering his conference table. We found the other leak, Gavin said, pointing to a stack of spreadsheets. What is it? I asked. Scholarships, he said. I frowned. Bay Ridge gives out 4 scholarships a year, $5,000 each. It is their flagship program. They put the winners' pictures in the local paper. They give out 4 public scholarships, Gavin corrected, but according to the books, they gave out 12 last year. He handed me a list. Here are the 4 real ones, he said. Local high school kids, checks cashed, tuition paid. But look at the other 8. I scanned the list. Recipient, Michael Vance. Amount, $5,000. Recipient, Sarah Jenkins. Amount, $5,000. Recipient, David Ross. Amount, $5,000. I ran the names. Gavin said, they do not exist. Not in the local school districts, not in the state college enrollment database, the social security numbers listed on the 1099 forms. Fake, they are randomized sequences. So where did the money go, I asked. Checks were issued to these names, Gavin said, and they were mobile deposited into an account at a digital bank. We traced the IP address of the deposits. He looked at me. The IP address matches the Wi-Fi at the Holt residence, he said, and the digital bank account is linked to a debit card that has been used for gas, groceries, and, interestingly, a payment to a divorce attorney. A divorce attorney? I asked. Just a consultation fee. Gavin said, $500. Paid 3 months ago. I stared at the paper. They were stealing from imaginary children. They were creating fake students, writing checks to them, and then depositing those checks into a slush fund. And one of them had consulted a divorce lawyer. Trouble in paradise, I murmured. This is the nail in the coffin. Lil, Gavin said. Embezzling from a nonprofit is bad. But faking scholarships? That brings in the Attorney General. That brings in the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. This is prison time. I took the evidence. I am not going to the Attorney General yet. I said, where are you going? Gavin asked. I am going to cut off the head of the snake. I said, Dr. Elaine Merritt was the chair of the Bay Ridge Community Foundation. She was a retired vascular surgeon, a woman of immense dignity and influence in Ashford Harbor. She was the one who gave Kyle his credibility. She was the one who vouched for him. I emailed her requesting a brief meeting regarding compliance concerns. I used my professional title. She agreed to see me on Saturday morning at her home. I sat in her sunroom, surrounded by orchids. Dr. Merritt poured tea from a silver pot. You said this was urgent. Lillian? She asked. I know your sister well. Marissa is a dynamo. She is, I said. I placed a black binder on the coffee table. Dr. Merritt. I said, I am not here as Marissa's sister. I am here as a compliance analyst who has discovered a significant irregularity in the Foundation's financials. Irregularity? Dr. Merritt frowned. We have an external audit every year. I opened the binder. Your auditor checks the math. I said, I check the reality. I walked her through it. I showed her the ghost pledging, the donations recorded in my name that I never made. I showed her the inflated vendor payments to Harborstone events. I showed her the fake scholarships. And finally, I showed her the flow of funds, from the foundation to the shell company, to Kyle and Marissa's personal accounts. I did not use emotional language. I did not say they stole from me. I said unauthorized diversion of assets and falsification of donor records. Dr. Merritt went pale. She put her teacup down. Her hand was trembling. This cannot be true, she whispered. He is the face of this organization. The numbers are the truth. Dr. Merritt, I said, I have confirmed these findings with a forensic accountant. I closed the binder. I am filing a formal complaint with the Attorney General's Charities Division on Monday. I said, but out of respect for you, and for the actual good work the foundation does, I wanted you to see this first. Doctor, Merritt looked at me. She looked at the binder. She realized, in that moment, that her legacy was about to be destroyed by a man she had trusted. Thank you, Lillian, she said, her voice like ice. You may leave the binder. I walked out of her house. I knew what she would do. She was a surgeon. She would cut out the rot to save the patient. Kyle found me 2 hours later. I was loading groceries into my car in the supermarket parking lot. He pulled his SUV up behind me, blocking me in. He jumped out. He looked manic. His hair was unkempt, his eyes wild. He was wearing a tracksuit, not his usual suit. Lillian, he shouted. We need to talk. Now. I kept loading my bags. I am busy. Kyle, Elaine just called me, he said, his voice cracking. She suspended me. She suspended me from the board pending an investigation. Do you have any idea what you have done? I turned to face him. I did not do anything. Kyle, you did. You wrote the checks. You forged the signatures. He stepped closer, invading my space. He smelled of sweat and fear. Listen to me, he hissed. You want the building? Fine. You win. I will sign it back to you. I will sign a quitclaim deed today. You get the whole thing. $1.2 million. It is yours. He was trying to bribe me with my own property. Just withdraw the complaint, he pleaded. Tell Elaine it was a misunderstanding. Tell the court you made a mistake about the notary. We can fix this. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had laughed at me for lending him $700. I cannot withdraw the truth. Kyle, I said, take the building, he shouted, slamming his hand on the roof of my car. It is $1 million. Lillian, are you stupid? Take the win and walk away. I shook my head slowly. It is not about the building anymore. I said, then what is it about? He screamed. What do you want? I want to know why you opened a credit line in my name. I said, he froze. I want to know why you used my identity to launder money for a fake consulting firm. I said, he stepped back. The color drained from his face. I didn't, he stammered. I looked at him with zero sympathy. I am not settling. Kyle, I am not signing anything. I am letting the process finish. He looked at me with pure hatred. You are a monster, he whispered. You are destroying your own family. No, I said. I am just balancing the books. I got into my car. He stood there, blocked by his own vehicle, watching me maneuver around him. He looked small. For the first time, he looked exactly as small as he was. Marissa came that night. She did not block me in. She knocked on my door at 10 in the evening. When I opened it, she was crying. Real tears. This time, her mascara was running. She looked broken. Lil, please, she sobbed. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She collapsed onto my sofa. She curled up into a ball, hugging a throw pillow. He is ruining us. She wept. He is crazy. Lil, you have to believe me. I didn't know how bad it was. I stood by the armchair, watching her. You didn't know? I asked. You filed the probate correction. Marissa, you used the email RissyLou82. You deleted the page from Mom's file. She looked up, her eyes wide. She didn't know I knew that part. He made me, she cried. He told me it was just a technicality. He said Mom wanted us to have it, but the paperwork was messy. He said if we didn't fix it, the state would take half of it in taxes. I was scared. Lil, I just did what he told me. She reached out a hand toward me. We are sisters, she said. You and me against him. I am leaving him. Lil, I consulted a lawyer months ago. I knew he was shady. Please, help me. If we stick together, we can blame it all on him. We can say he manipulated both of us. It was a tempting narrative. The two sisters, united by betrayal, taking down the bad husband. But I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had mocked me in the group chat. The sister who had called my boss to get me fired just 2 days ago. You called David. I said, you told him I was having a breakdown. Was that Kyle making you do it? Marissa flinched. I was panicked, she said. I thought if you took some time off, You would calm down. I was trying to protect you from the stress. Lies. Layer upon layer of self-serving lies. I recognized the pattern. She was doing what she always did. She was pivoting to the role that gave her the most leverage. First, she was the rich, successful wife. Now she was the victimized, coerced woman. But she was never the villain in her own story, and she certainly never saw me as an equal. To her, I was just a resource. First a source of money, now a source of absolution. I do not believe you. Marissa, I said. Her face hardened. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. You are going to send me to jail? She asked. Your own sister? I am going to give the evidence to the court. I said, what happens after that is not up to me. She stood up. She smoothed her dress. You will regret this, she said. You think you are winning, but you are going to be all alone. No one loves a snitch. Lillian, get out, I said. She slammed the door on her way out. The sound echoed in the quiet apartment. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I did not feel lonely. I felt clean. The next morning, Nia called. We got the order. She said, the judge had granted our motion to compel the production of the notary logs from the man who had supposedly notarized my signature. Nia had tracked him down. He was a retired guy living in Florida now, but he had kept his old journals, as required by law. I went to Nia's office to see the scans. We looked at the entry for September 10th, 2 years ago, the day I was in Chicago, the day I supposedly signed away my inheritance. There was no entry for Lillian Adams. The stamp used on the document was a forgery, a rubber stamp made at a copy shop. But Nia had found something else. We cross-referenced the fake stamp with other filings Seward Rowe had made. She said, she laid out 3 other documents. One was a lien release for a property in the next town. One was a contractor affidavit. One was a loan application for a different LLC. All of them had the same notary stamp, James P. Miller. And the dates? I asked. Nia pointed to the log. They used the stamp in batches, she said. Look at these dates. June 4th, August 12th, September 10th. On those days, they generated dozens of documents. She looked at me, her face grim. They didn't just forge your signature, Lil. They forged signatures for contractors, for tenants, for other investors. We found a document signing away a mechanic's lien for a roofing company. The roofer probably never got paid. Other victims. It wasn't just a family betrayal. It was an enterprise. They were defrauding working people. Roofers, plumbers, small business owners who didn't have the time or the money to fight a complex legal battle. They did it to me because they thought I was weak. They did it to the others because they thought they were powerless. This is RICO territory, Nia said quietly. This is organized fraud. I looked at the documents. I saw the scope of it. Kyle and Marissa had built their golden life by stealing bricks from everyone else's foundations. File it, I said. File what? Nia asked. Everything. I said, the scholarship fraud, the notary forgery, the identity theft. Send it all to the judge. Send it to the Attorney General. But the settlement conference is tomorrow. Nia said, they are expecting us to come and negotiate. We will go. I said, I stood up and walked to the window. We will go, and we will sit there. And when they offer me money, I am going to put the handcuffs on the table. I was not just Lillian Adams anymore. I was the reckoning. I went home and prepared my clothes for court. I ironed my blouse. I polished my shoes. I looked at the folder on my desk. The audit. It was complete. Every number balanced. Every lie accounted for. The $700 loan had been the most expensive money they ever took. It had bought them a ticket to their own destruction. I turned off the light. I slept soundly. The silence in my apartment was not empty. It was waiting. The Ashford Harbor District Court was a building made of stern red brick and granite, designed to make everyone who entered feel slightly smaller than they actually were. I arrived 30 minutes early. I sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, watching the dust motes dance in the shafts of light falling from the high windows. I was wearing my best suit, A charcoal gray wool that was sharp, professional, and entirely unexciting. I looked like exactly what I was, a compliance analyst who had come to check the math. Marissa and Kyle arrived 10 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to begin. It was a performance. Marissa was wearing a soft pastel cardigan that looked slightly too big for her, designed to make her look frail. She was clinging to Kyle's arm as if she might collapse without his support. Her eyes were red-rimmed, likely from a strategic application of irritant or just the sheer terror of consequences. I could not tell the difference anymore. Kyle was wearing a navy suit, but his tie was slightly askew. He looked like a man who had not slept in 3 days. He was whispering something to Marissa, patting her hand, playing the role of the stoic protector. They saw me sitting on the bench. Marissa flinched. Kyle's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. They did not say hello. They walked past me into the courtroom, trailing a scent of expensive perfume and anxiety. I followed them in. The courtroom was quiet. Judge Holloway was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for hating wasted time. Nia was already at the plaintiff's table. She looked terrifyingly calm. She had 3 binders stacked in front of her. The Holt's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who usually handled high-end real estate closings, looked out of his depth. He was sweating. He was used to arguing about property lines and zoning variances, not defending a complex web of identity theft and embezzlement. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. "We are here on the matter of Adams versus Holt and Seaward Row Properties," she said. "This is a hearing on the plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction and attachment of assets. Ms. Carver, you may proceed." Nia stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not pace. She simply opened the first binder. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not a family dispute. It is a case of systematic financial predation." She walked to the easel set up near the witness stand and flipped the chart paper. "The defense will argue that the plaintiff, Lillian Adams, is a disgruntled family member upset over a small personal loan of $700. They will argue that she is unstable and that her claims are retaliatory." Nia paused, looking directly at Kyle. "But the evidence will show that the $700 loan was not a dispute, it was a test." Marissa let out a small, audible sob. Judge Holloway glanced at her over her glasses, unimpressed. Nia continued, "On November 3rd, the defendants asked Lillian Adams for $700. They claimed it was for a vendor deposit. They shamed her for asking for repayment. They publicly humiliated her at a charity gala, establishing a narrative that Ms. Adams was financially incompetent and petty." Nia flipped the page. Why? Why would a couple managing a successful real estate portfolio and a prominent community foundation need to borrow $700? And why would they go to such lengths to destroy the credibility of the person they borrowed it from? Nia pointed to a date on the timeline. Because on that same day, November 3rd, a credit line of $48,000 was opened in Lillian Adams's name at Brightline Credit Union, a credit line secured by an asset that Lillian Adams supposedly no longer owned. Nia called our first witness, the representative from Brightline Credit Union. Mr. Henderson looked nervous. He sat in the witness box, clutching his briefcase. "Mr. Henderson?" Nia asked. "Can you tell the court what documentation was used to verify the guarantor for the $48,000 line of credit opened on November 3rd? Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Yes," he said. "We received a guarantor application in the name of Lillian Adams. It was supported by a schedule of real estate owned, specifically listing a 20% interest in a commercial unit at 12 Water Street." "And who submitted these documents?" Nia asked. "They were uploaded through the secure portal by the primary applicant," Mr. Henderson said. "And who was the primary applicant?" "Seaward Row Properties, LLC," Mr. Henderson said. "Verified by the managing member, Kyle Holt." Nia let the silence hang in the room for a moment. "So," Nia said slowly, "Kyle Holt submitted a document to your bank claiming Lillian Adams owned the property in order to secure a loan. Is that correct?" "Yes," Mr. Henderson said. "Thank you," Nia said. She turned to the defense table. And yet, Your Honor, just 2 weeks ago, Seaward Row Properties attempted to sell that very same unit, and in the closing documents for that sale, they produced a notarized affidavit claiming Lillian Adams had assigned that interest to Kyle Holt 2 years ago. Nia held up 2 pieces of paper. They told the bank she owned it to get a loan. They told the title company she did not own it to sell the building. Both of these statements cannot be true, and both of them rely on documents signed by Lillian Adams. Nia turned to me. Ms. Adams, did you sign either of these documents? I stood up. My voice was steady. No, I said, I did not. Mr. Sterling tried to object. Your Honor, this is hearsay. We have a notarized assignment. Judge Holloway cut him off. Mr. Sterling, unless you can produce the notary to testify to the validity of that signature, I suggest you sit down. The affidavit regarding the notary stamp from the defunct kiosk is quite compelling. Mr. Sterling sat down. Next, Nia called Gavin Rhee. Gavin set up his laptop. He projected the flow of funds onto the screen. It was clinical. It was brutal. Here, Gavin said, pointing to the green circle, this is the Bay Ridge Community Foundation, and here are the payments to Harborstone events. He clicked a button. The lines turned red. We analyzed the invoices from Harborstone. Gavin said, they follow a specific pattern. They are always for round numbers. $2,000, $4,500. Real vendor invoices are almost never round numbers due to tax and line item pricing. He clicked again. And here is the reimbursement loop. Money goes from Bay Ridge to Harborstone, then from Harborstone to Northtide Consulting, and finally, from Northtide to the personal accounts of Kyle and Marissa Holt. Mr. Sterling stood up again. Objection. Relevance? This is a hearing about an asset freeze on a property. The foundation's finances are a separate matter. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Mr. Sterling, if the funds used to purchase or maintain the property in question were derived from illicit activity, it is entirely relevant. Overruled, Gavin continued. But the most significant finding, Gavin said, relates to the scholarships. Kyle shifted in his seat. He looked like he was about to vomit. We found 12 scholarship checks issued last year, Gavin said. 8 of them were issued to individuals who do not exist in any educational database. The Social Security numbers were fabricated. And where were those checks deposited? Nia asked. They were mobile deposited into an account controlled by Kyle Holt. Gavin said. The courtroom was silent. The air had changed. This wasn't a civil dispute anymore. The word embezzlement was hanging over the room like a guillotine blade. I looked at Marissa. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at Gavin's chart, her face pale and rigid. She was doing the math. She was realizing that the house of cards wasn't just falling, it was burning. Then came the surprise. Nia looked at the doors at the back of the courtroom. Plaintiff calls Ms. Jennifer Trent. Kyle's head snapped around. Marissa gasped. Jennifer Trent walked in. She was a woman in her 40s, wearing a sensible suit. She looked terrified, but determined. She was accompanied by her own lawyer. She took the stand. Ms. Trent, Nia said, what was your relationship to Harborstone events? I was the bookkeeper, Ms. Trent said quietly. I was hired by Kyle Holt 3 years ago to manage the invoicing. And can you tell the court about the nature of the invoices you generated? They were duplicates, she said. Her voice shook. Kyle would send me a legitimate invoice from a real caterer. Then he would tell me to create a copy of it, but change the letterhead to Harborstone and increase the total by 20%. And did you know where the extra money went? Nia asked. Ms. Trent looked down at her hands. Kyle told me it was for management fees. He said it was standard industry practice. And did you ever interact with Marissa Holt regarding these invoices? Ms. Trent nodded. Yes, last year, when we were setting up the new template. Marissa sent me an email. She wanted to change the font on the Harborstone invoices. She said the old one looked too generic. She said we needed something that looked more high-end. I looked at Marissa. The game was over. She couldn't play the ignorant wife. She had picked the font for the fake invoices. She had formatted the lies. Nia turned to the judge. Your Honor, Ms. Trent has been granted immunity by the District Attorney's Office in exchange for her testimony in the parallel criminal investigation that is being opened as of this morning. Kyle put his head in his hands. Marissa stared straight ahead, her eyes glassy. Nia closed her binder. We have established a pattern of fraud, forgery, and theft that extends from the charity to the real estate company. The defendants have stolen Lillian Adams's identity to fund this enterprise. They have stolen her inheritance, and they are currently attempting to liquidate the primary asset to flee the jurisdiction or hide the funds. We ask that the court freeze all assets connected to Seaward Row Properties, including the proceeds from the pending sale of Unit 4B, and that those proceeds be held in escrow until a final judgment is rendered. Judge Holloway did not hesitate. The court finds that the plaintiff has demonstrated a high likelihood of success on the merits, she said. The evidence of fraud is substantial. She looked at Kyle and Marissa. Mr. and Mrs. Holt, you are hereby ordered to cease all financial transactions related to Seaward Row Properties. The sale of Unit 4B may proceed only on the condition that 100% of the net proceeds are wired directly to the escrow account of the court. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order on the bank accounts of the Bay Ridge Community Foundation pending the Attorney General's review. She banged the gavel. Hearing adjourned. The settlement conference happened 2 hours later in a small, windowless conference room down the hall. It was supposed to be a negotiation. It turned into a surrender. Mr. Sterling was pale. He knew his clients were facing prison time. The only thing he could do for them now was to mitigate the damage. If they could settle the civil suit with me, if they could pay me back before the criminal charges were fully filed, they might get leniency. They might get a plea deal. Kyle sat at the table, staring at the wood grain. He looked deflated, like a balloon that had lost its air. Marissa sat as far away from him as possible, her arms crossed, staring at the wall. Nia did the talking. Here is the number, Nia said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. $1,250,000. Mr. Sterling choked. That is the entire value of the sale, he sputtered. That leaves my clients with nothing. It leaves them with their freedom, potentially, Nia said coldly. She tapped the paper. Let's break it down. $250,000 for Lillian's rightful share of the property, adjusted for market appreciation over the last 2 years. $400,000 in punitive damages for the identity theft and credit fraud. And $600,000 in restitution for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and the reputational damage caused by your clients. It is extortion, Kyle muttered. Nia looked at him. Extortion is threatening to release embarrassing photos. Kyle, this is restitution. You stole her identity. You stole her inheritance. You used her name to launder money, and you tried to get her fired from her job by claiming she was insane. Nia leaned forward. We can walk away. Kyle, we can let the civil case drag on for years while you sit in a cell, or you can sign the release of funds from the escrow account today. You pay Lillian what she is owed. The building is sold. The money goes to her. And when the district attorney asks Lillian if she has been made whole financially, she can say yes. That might shave 2 years off your sentence. Kyle looked at Marissa. What do you want to do? He asked. Marissa didn't look at him. Just sign it, she whispered. I just want to go home. Kyle picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed the agreement. Seaward Row Properties agrees to pay Lillian Adams the sum of $1,250,000. Nia took the paper. She checked the signature. She checked the date. Thank you, she said. We stood up. As we packed our bags, Mr. Sterling looked at me. Ms. Adams, he said, my clients are requesting a non-disclosure agreement. They want to ensure the details of this settlement remain private. I looked at Nia. Nia smiled. No, I said. Mr. Sterling blinked. It is standard practice. I am not signing an NDA. I said, I am taking my money, and I am keeping my voice. I walked out of the room. The afternoon sun was low and cold when we walked out of the courthouse. The wind coming off the harbor cut through my coat. But it felt clean. It felt bracing. Nia hugged me on the steps. "You did it," she said. "The wire transfer is already authorized. It will hit your account tomorrow morning. $1,250,000. It was a number that didn't feel real yet. It was freedom. It was a house. It was a future where I didn't have to worry about the price of anything ever again. Go celebrate," Nia said. "I have to go file the dismissal of the attachment so the funds can move." She walked away toward her car. I stood on the steps, buttoning my coat. "Lillian," I turned. Marissa was standing there. Kyle was gone, probably arguing with his lawyer in the lobby. But Marissa had followed me out. She looked small in the daylight. The makeup she had reapplied was already smudging. "Are you happy?" she asked. Her voice was bitter, sharp like broken glass. I looked at her. I felt a strange absence of emotion. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. I just saw her. "I am relieved." I said, "You destroyed us." She said, "You know that? We are going to lose the house. We are going to lose the cars. We might go to jail." "You did that to yourselves." "Marissa," I said. She shook her head, tears spilling over again. "You did this to me over $700. She said. "It is insane. You burned down our entire lives over a $700 loan." I looked at her. She still didn't get it. She still thought this was about the money I lent her for the lighting deposit. She still thought it was about being petty. "No," I said. My voice was low, barely a whisper over the wind. I walked down one step so I was eye level with her. "You did this to me over $700. I said. She frowned, confused. "You thought you could use me." I said. "You thought I was so desperate for your approval, so weak, that I would let you humiliate me in public and steal my mother's legacy in private. You thought I would stay quiet forever because I was the nice sister." I leaned in closer. "You tested me with that loan. Marissa, you wanted to see if I would fold. And when I didn't, you tried to break me." I straightened up. "I didn't do this for the $700. I did it because you forgot who I was. You forgot that I am the one who keeps the records." Marissa stared at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of jail, or fear of poverty. Fear of me. She realized she had been living in a cage with a tiger she had mistaken for a house cat. I turned away from her. "Goodbye." "Marissa," I said. I walked down the steps. I didn't look back. I heard her calling my name once, but the wind took the sound and carried it out to sea. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. The silence wrapped around me. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Incoming call. Dad. I let it ring. Incoming call. Aunt Carol. I let it ring. Incoming call. Unknown number. Probably a reporter. The story of the charity fraud would be breaking news by tonight. I put the phone on the passenger seat. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady. I had my money. I had my name back. I had justice for my mother. But as I looked out at the parking lot, at the empty space where my family used to be, I realized the price I had paid. I was free. I was wealthy. And I was completely, utterly alone. I was no longer the person everyone could use. I was no longer the anchor. I was something new. Something harder. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what my life looked like without the constant noise of their drama, without the role of the dutiful sister to play. But as I pulled out of the lot, leaving the courthouse behind me, I realized something else. For the first time in 33 years, the road ahead was mine, and mine alone. I drove toward the highway, and I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed following Lillian's journey from betrayal to calculated retribution. It is a reminder that sometimes the quietest people are the ones you should fear the most. I would love to hear from you. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what you would have done if you were in Lillian's shoes. Would you have taken the settlement, or would you have pressed for a trial? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Share your thoughts in English in the comments below.